Hi, everybody. I'm Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, the book initiative that began the day of lockdown when author tours like mine were canceled and bookstores were shuttered. And we're now going on our 5th year. I like to say we're about to enter kindergarten. So today on Frontliner, we have Pulitzer Prize winner Jayne Anne Phillips to talk about her absolutely extraordinary book, Night Watch. This is just a superlative, immersive story. So let me tell you a little bit about Jayne, but before I do, I just want to tell people, if you have questions for Jayne, pop them in the chat and I'll get to them. Also, we encourage everybody to use indie bookstores for your book purchases. We've made it really easy for you by putting up a link to bookshop.org, which will go right to Jayne's books, all of her books, and they're all phenomenal. So you might want to order all of them all at once just to have them all with you. All right, so here's my introduction. Jayne Anne Phillips is the author of Black Tickets, Machine Dreams, Fast Lanes, Shelter, Motherkind, Rock and Termite, and Quiet Dell. She is the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship and a Bunting Fellowship, 2 National Endowment for the Arts Fellowships, National Book Award finalist, and twice a finalist for National Book Critics Circle Award. She lives in New York and in Boston. This is an incredible novel. As I said, it was not only a Pulitzer Prize winner, it was longlisted for the National Book Award in fiction, a New Yorker Best Book of the Year. And it's from one of her most extraordinary writers. It's an incredible story about a mother and a daughter and a mysterious man seeking refuge in an insane asylum in the chaotic aftermath of the Civil War. And it's also really about enduring beyond all costs. So let me just read some of the high praise, and then I'll shut up and we'll let Jayne Anne speak. From Tayari Jones, author of An American Marriage, a tour de force. From Wendy Smith at the Washington Post, beautiful, mournful, carefully and engrossingly crafted. The good suffer equally with the bad. Phillips' artistic conscience won't let her flinch from this truth, yet her generous heart won't let it be the last word. We have another rave from the Wall Street Journal, a story of trauma and restoration in the aftermath of the Civil War. Goodness is a real thing in this novel, a verifiable force, and the question posed is whether we still have the sensitivity to discern it. Minneapolis Star-Tribune, the story is compelling, even beautiful. We've got Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Readers will be impressed, rivaling Phillips' previous novels. And from The Guardian, Phillips' depiction of a ravaged world in which so many have lost their way or hold it stolen from them feels true to the profoundly destabilizing nature of her subject. With this excellent novel, Phillips has brought a little more of this foundation, old American episode into the light. So welcome so much, Jayne Anne Phillips. We're thrilled to have you here. Thank you for being here.
I'm thrilled to be part of the kindergarten class.
Yes. Hopefully we can get some, class parents in here too. Okay, so I always feel that there's something that is haunting a writer into writing their book. I mean, Night Watch is about 3 people, Kona Leave, her mother Eliza, delivered by a man named Papa, who is not her father, but is a sadistic war veteran, to the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in West Virginia. And it's about how they have to survive and what survives them and what survival really means. So anyway, I always feel there's something haunting a writer. What led you to write this book?
Well, I had been thinking about war, in particular Civil Wars. I'd written 2 previous novels, Machine Dreams, which was about the Civil War between North and South Vietnam, and Lark and Termite, which was turned around the Civil War between North and South Korea. And at that point, I just felt I had to look at our own Civil War. I was thinking about it for years before I started. And typically books occur to me in language because I did start out as a poet. So I'll write a scene or a section that might be short, but this book appeared to me with the very beginning of the book, which is unusual. The first person voice of Connelly. She's the only one who speaks in first person in the book. And she's in the midst of this chaotic scene, about to take a journey that she has no idea how it will end. And that was my first foray into the book. And at the time, I had no idea where the book was going. I certainly knew that it felt as though it really was inside that period of time from the very beginning, although I did a lot of research about how people lived during those days, and I tried to approximate a form of speech that would have been believable, if not perfect, for the period of time. And in that first section of the book, there are a lot of secrets introduced, and the book moves through them. And I also wanted to write a book that revealed its secrets slowly, that continued changing, as you went through, so that you really would not know where you were going until you get there at the end of the book.
Did you know the secrets as you were starting to write, or was that something later? Did they reveal themselves to you?
They really revealed themselves to me as well. I mean, the way the book sort of works is that you start in 1874 in the wake of the war. The war is only 9 years past. And poor people, particularly displaced people, are struggling. It's a brutal world. And you sort of go through that first part of the book. You're introduced to the asylum and the world of the asylum. And then the book switches back 10 years to 1864, and you begin to understand why the characters you've encountered are the way they are. You see what they've been through, and more is revealed about where they came from and the kinds of secrets they've been living with even pre-war, and what kind of lives they're trying to build now.
Okay. I find the structure completely compelling. The chapters are also interspersed with quotes by Dr. Thomas Story Kirkbride, who began something called moral treatment in the lunatic asylum. So I was absolutely fascinated with this, and I wanted to know if you could please tell us about this and why it was abandoned. I mean, why wouldn't they build on this instead? What happened?
The same thing that always happens.
Right.
The regime changes, right?
Right.
You get a bad regime. Thomas Story Kirkbride is really an interesting figure, and I knew about him before, but when I began to do research into Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum and many of the asylums at that time, right before the Civil War, it was basically said to the states and expected of all the states that they would establish a very large asylum to take care of the mentally ill in their state. And it was an amazing idea. In 1854, Thomas Story Kirkbride wrote a little thin book called On the Constructions, Organization, and General Arrangements of Hospitals for the Insane. And this was incredibly influential across the country. He was, for about 30 years, the most influential psychiatrist physician. They didn't use the word psychiatrist then, but in the country. And this little book told the states exactly how to build these immense asylums, down to every piece of construction. The way that they would deal with fires, the fact that there needed to be 200 to 300 acres of land, because these asylums were meant to be self-determining with their own dairies and farming, and he imported moral treatment from Europe, and it was simply humane treatment for the insane. He didn't believe in restraints. He believed in space and light, sort of the idea of treating a TB patient at the time. Each room was to be a private room. The Trans-Allegheny Asylum is 9 miles of interior space.
Wow, that's
It
incredible.
for a fourth of a mile, the buildings themselves, when it was finished. It was the largest hand-cut limestone building in the world other than the Kremlin at the time that it was built. Despite the fact that it was very, very huge, he believed that there should be only 250 patients in this large expanse, and they should each have a private room. And he treated everyone with a mixture of what we would call now talk therapy and a regimen designed for each person. So they came out of their rooms in the morning. When they went to breakfast, the room was locked, and the rest of the day they were to be out working in the garden, taking painting lessons, playing battledore, which was an early form of tennis. And in addition, he believed they should be walking 3 to 5 to 7 miles a day on these beautiful segregated walking trails in the woods. So that was moral treatment, and it really is at the heart of the novel, because the irony
Right.
that the world itself is such a brutal place, particularly for these characters, and that they actually find refuge in this society.
I know it's incredible that the one safe place is a lunatic asylum. I mean, even the word lunatic. There are also, interspersed in the book were lists, reasons for admission to the insane asylum, and I laughed out loud when it said that novel reading was one way that could get you in there. These are, and they were like, salaries. I thought they were fascinating and brilliant additions to the novel because they added a kind of texture and a kind of reality. But I wanted to know, that was what I thought. I wanted to know your reasons for why you included them, and almost as if they were found objects, because they just really worked splendidly in the novel, I thought.
Well, for the past, I guess, 3 books, I have tried to get my publishers to let me use photographs or clippings from newspapers at the time. Quiet Dell, which is about a multiple murder in the 1930s. I really followed the newspapers of the time and included clippings from them between the chapters. And in Lark and Termite, you see photographs of the actual tunnel at No Gun Ree. And in this book, I contacted historical documents, archives in West Virginia and at West Virginia University, and they were kind enough to let me pay a fee to use these documents. Some of the photographs, for instance, the photograph of their room, which in color is much more beautiful, and that's on my website, JayneAnnePhillips.com. I took that photo. I decided I was on a tour of the asylum, which is now a nonprofit, and people can be toured through it. I decided that was Connolly and Eliza's room, and I wrote toward that image. And there was another wonderful photograph of the Bloody Seventh Cavalry, which is the unit that I have Connolly's father join when he disappears at the beginning of the war. And to me, the image of him is in that photograph. He's the one farthest to the left. So this kind of research is important to me in kind of visualizing the book.
Right.
It adds something for the reader. I mean, those lists were from the archives of the asylum.
They're incredible. I just want to sell. I just happen to. This is like a photograph of the dining room in the insane asylum.
Look with the
I know.
tablecloths and how beautifully set it is, and of course, there's a scene that takes place there in the book. You really get a sense of the gentility of this refuge, especially for the sort of more acclimated patients.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a fancy restaurant. It was extraordinary to look at that. I want to talk about the whole idea of how stories serve us and save us. Early on, when Papa hands over Eliza and the girl to the lunatic asylum, he tells them, "Times are hard. Tell the story." That quote just reverberates. And one other character says, all stories are lies. So I love those two quotes, because there's always, like, a yin yang about, when we tell stories, are we telling the truth, or are we just telling our truth, or is it completely fabricated? And if so, why? I'd love to hear you talk about how you feel that stories can save us or save characters.
Well, I love the fact that human beings think in narrative terms. That simply is the way that we think and the way that we understand things. And I've always said that history tells the facts as understood by the victor, but stories tell the truth inside the facts. They tell the story inside the facts.
Right.
And they tell usually the emotional, physiological truth, the kinds of things that we take into our bodies and our memories and our subconscious. And it was very lucky for me that Thomas Story Kirkbride's middle name was Story. That was another sort of connection. And in the book, I invent a nephew for him who's named after his uncle, who's been mentored by his uncle. His name is Thomas Kirkbride Story. So he's called Dr. Story.
I love it.
And that was a way to sort of pull him into the asylum a few years before Connolly and her mother get there. So, of course, he's interested in implementing his uncle's methods. And he's brought quite a few changes to the asylum.
There's a huge question in the novel that's about, how do we endure what we endure? This struck me particularly there are some really brutal scenes between Papa and Eliza, which are overwhelmingly sadistic, but necessary to the narrative. How difficult were those scenes to write for you, and how necessary?
They're very difficult to write, because certainly as I'm writing, I'm inside the story. And in fact, readers have said to me, when I read your books, it's not as though I'm reading from the outside, it's as though I'm inside the story. And I wanted readers to actually experience what they experience. And it's not easy.
Right.
The assault sort of speaks to who Papa is and
Right.
his need for control. And it also speaks to who Eliza becomes, because he returns to victimize her. And how is he able to do that? What's the power that he establishes, and how can anyone be free of that kind of power? Because of course, assaults on women and rape of women has been a weapon of war since war began.
Right. And it still is.
It still is. It certainly still is. And then later, I think too, the Battle of the Wilderness scenes are quite difficult to read and imagine. But I wanted to really take the reader inside this battle, which to me stands out even amongst all the terrible battles of the Civil War. I walked that battlefield in Virginia, thanks to VCCA. And now, of course, it doesn't look as it did then. But back then, it was just before sort of the Orange Plank Road and the numerous battles that went on there. Lee tempted or forced Grant to do battle inside this forest that was full of tiny trees, that is, trees that maybe 8 inches around, that were so thickly grown that a man had to walk sideways. So it forced them into hand-to-hand combat. And there was so much gunpowder in the air after 3 days that the whole forest exploded, and it became a horrible fire. And that needed to really be done in such a way that you're inside the mind of the sharpshooter, as he's called at that
Right.
time. So yeah, the reader has to risk something too, I think.
Yes, exactly. But that immerses you so much more in the novel. I'm going to interrupt for a question that we have
Mhm.
from Suzanne Strumpek-Shea. Hi, Suzanne. She's curious about how Jane Anne gathered, organized, and chose from what had to be stacks of reference material as she wrote.
Well, it wasn't really a choice. It was a process. I worked on this book for 8 years, and I would say that at least 4 of them had to do with getting very deeply involved in the research. I didn't know what I was going to choose. I simply researched, um, shelves of books about the Civil War, about the asylum, about moral treatment, about Kirkbride, about medicine at the time, herbal medicine. Um, and as I went along, I sort of found things, and the things that I needed was sort of stand out as though they were in illumined prose. um, and they went into the book.
That's extraordinary. And speaking about, I want to talk about the touch of magical realism here in the character of, I'm going to butcher her name. Is it Diarbla or is it Diarbla?
I used to think of her as Deirbla, but the actual Irish pronunciation is Dervla.
Diarbla.
In
Okay.
Ireland, it would be called Dervla. Yeah.
Okay. Well, she's an extraordinary character. Can you tell us, where did she come from in the writing of this? When did she pop in where you realized she needed to be in this narrative?
Oh, she was there from the very beginning. Um, she is the repository of the past, and she really has mothered both Eliza and the character who is called the sharpshooter. And by the end of the book, we know his actual name, the name that he chose for himself when he enlisted um, in the Northern troops for the Civil War. She's an Irish. I don't think you could say she's an immigrant because she first comes to South Carolina. Her family first come as indentured servants, which was almost like, these indentured periods of time could be 20 years. And people who work for 20 years for nothing, building up nothing for themselves, stay poor. Her mother has died, her family are gone, but she's living in a past, that we find out about as we get deeper into the book. And she has, as I say, it turns out that, I guess it's okay to give spoilers here. The sharpshooter, the character known as the sharpshooter, and then later as the Night Watch, is her adopted son.
Yeah, it's incredible, incredible. We have another question. Okay, hold on. Did Dr. Story prefer using herbal remedies?
I wouldn't say so. I think that was more the province of women and people who lived in a very rural area. That was the way everyone kind of performed medicine because there were very few doctors. And what did the doctors even know at that point? Sometimes not as much as these women who were herbalists. His methods of treatment had more to do, I think, with occupying the mind. And if someone was very upset or being dangerous to themselves or others, he would put them into a room that was empty. There were wings further back that were more for the criminally insane, who had their own guards and who could earn privileges of sort of moving into a situation where they would have more freedom. But basically, he dealt with people on a very individual basis. And I wouldn't say that he wasn't really trained in the application of herbal remedies. He wasn't using any kind of so-called medicine except the moral treatment itself.
The moral treatment is great. I love that whole idea. I want to talk about the language in the book, which of course is something you are known for. Not just the words that feel exactly right and specific to the time, but the cadence and the rhythm of them. Do you read your work out loud? How difficult was it to get everything so right?
Well, of course, I kept rewriting and rewriting and rewriting it for a number of years. But I tend to write very sparingly. I'm very self-censoring. Nothing sort of makes it to the page until I've thought it through. And I do write with a sense of the sentence itself, the weight of the syllables, the music of the words, the weight of the line. I like a line to be very tensile or tightly strung in a way. At the same time, I really count on the subconscious power of language, what we know about words. If you look a word up in the dictionary and you go back to the history of the word, you learn such interesting things about all that a word contains. And I think all of that is at work, actually, in the sentences that we read and write.
Okay, and we have yet another question. This is from Renee. She actually had two questions. One was, do you play any musical instruments? And the next one was, how did you feel? How did you find out about the Pulitzer Prize? And how did you feel about it?
I don't play a musical instrument. I mean, there are certain people who are, I'm also directionally dyslexic.
Me too. I walk out of my house and I go the wrong way.
I never have a sense of where I am in the physical world, only in the internal world. And I don't play an instrument. And I wasn't particularly good at math. I think those things kind of go together. But an intense reader, very, very early on. I mean, that really was how I related to the world from the time I was a child. The Pulitzer Prize was quite a surprise. I've made a little poem there. I don't check my email, especially after I retired and I was sort of working on the book these past few years. I don't check my email regularly. Sometimes I'll go a couple of days, and I was about to go out and transplant some plants on my little balcony garden. And I checked my email just before going out there, and there was an email from my editor's assistant, Rob. And it just said in the subject line, "You won the Pulitzer Prize!" !
Oh,
I was writing back, "Are you kidding?" And then I saw beneath a couple of other messages that just said, "Congratulations, congratulations." So, and right then my editor called me, Ann Close, who has been my editor at Knopf for maybe 30 years.
Wow.
And what patience she had with this book, which we had been sending back and forth to each other for 6 or 7 years. And she actually put off her own retirement so that she could see this book through the publication process.
That's great.
Retired at the point that the prize was announced, but she called me right away and was just really over the moon about it. And that felt so great to me.
That's wonderful. Do you feel, does this spur you on to take more risks in your writing, or does it make you anxious at all because now so much is expected of you, though you've certainly delivered time and time again?
Well, people are going to complain about whatever I publish next. That's
right.
I'm not going to worry about it too much.
Good.
Just kind of go forward.
So there's another wonderful quote from the book, Jayne Anne, which says, "Gratitude for one's survival lasts longer than love," which I wrote down because I thought it was so profound. Can you say something about that?
My goodness, who says that?
I wrote it down and then I thought, I don't remember who said that, but it's in the book.
I think that's a measure of what someone has been through.
Yeah.
That you cannot survive without love, without loving life in some way, no matter how difficult your circumstances might be. And I think what really stands out in this book is that these characters, through the long separations, they're aware of one another.
Yes.
They never stop trying to connect with one another, although it would seem to be just an impossible task in that world at that time. Um, and there's a little bit of magic in the book in terms of the way that all of that begins to move and sift and kind of gains power as you move onward in the book. Um, I think when one has really struggled to survive, all the love you have felt toward whoever is just kind of part of your way of being. Maybe they are no longer differentiated um, because many of those you loved are probably gone.
Right.
But are they gone if they're part of your mind and
Right.
your struggle?
Right. So you originally wrote poetry. So this is a two-part question. The first part, Jayne, is do you still write poetry? And the second part is you also write scripts. Tell me what that's like and how it's better or worse than writing novels.
Um, I'm just learning
You're just learning. Okay.
to write a script. I'm trying with another friend to write a screenplay for Quiet Dell, which is set in the 30s and is very much about women and the options open to women at that time. And it also deals with the first sort of yellow journalism around a serial murder in which newspapers at that time in the Depression are using this story to sell copies. And people have an insatiable, hunger to read about it because it deals with serial murder.
Right.
Surprise, how many TV shows today are, everywhere.
And movies also.
And sometimes I wonder if it's a form of aggression towards women, simply, the fascination with it. But in any case, we are trying to write a screenplay for what would be a prestige TV series.
That's
something.
wonderful. That's wonderful. I tried to write scripts a few times. I got as far as a finalist at Sundance, and the ultimate decision was your scripts read like novels. So I can't help but get interior with the characters and screenwriting.
I find that kind of thing fascinating in movies.
Yeah.
So I guess it's finding some kind of happy medium between something that's moving quickly enough and something that has that voice to it, whether it's, I guess there's a rule against using voiceovers, but I actually like voiceovers.
I love voiceovers.
I'm not using any voiceovers, but it's just it's a totally different thing. So I'm not sure where it'll go, but I'm very interested in working on it.
You have another comment, question? Come on. Whoops. See if I can get that to show. Okay, this is from Robin. I have a silly question. Have you worn glasses most of your life like me? Yes, I love your glasses.
I'm glad you like these glasses. I have another pair. I have about 4 pairs of glasses. None of them are prescription, just like, and I never wore glasses. I still have very good vision, but I need reading glasses. So these are my blue ones.
They're wonderful. They're wonderful. So I have one last question, and I ask it because I'm a totally anxious and obsessive person myself. What is obsessing you now and why? Beside politics, which is obsessing everybody.
My schedule, because it's very busy. I always have things to do. It's fun. Getting to talk to you, has been fun. So I'm obsessing over doing all the things I need to do at the time that I need to do them. and I'm obsessing over another little book that I'm working on. I call it a little book. It's just a little book. And other than that, yes, I'm certainly obsessing over politics.
Yeah, we all are. We all are. I want to tell everybody who's out there, I just want to remind you, we love indie bookstores at here and outside here. Go to your favorite one to get Jayne Anne's books. I've made it really easy for you by putting a link right up there, so you can just click on it and get there. Thank you all for showing up here. Oh, and we have another question that just came. Okay, here we go. Denise would like to know, what are you reading right now?
Well, I'm rereading The Sympathizer because the Pulitzer has, they have one writer interview another, and I'm incredibly privileged to
That's great.
do an interview with Viet. So I'm reading actually all of his books. His new memoir is amazing, almost just incendiary to read. And I'm reading Master Slave, Husband, Wife.
Right. Oh, that's a great book.
Which is the book that I suggested for the book club that I'm in. And I'm reading Honor Moore's new book.
Oh, that one's really good too. Oh, really great choices.
Love that book. Very short, absolutely, but she achieves a kind of voice that really moves in and out of time in an amazing way. It's a book about a termination. It's called Termination, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is.
It's called Termination. It's about a termination that she had when she was 22, and she's writing it from the standpoint of someone who's in her 70s, and somehow all of time is inside the narrative. And it's a very tight, short book. So I suggest everyone buy all of these books.
Yeah, and don't forget, you can go to bookshop.org. And actually, I think Renee asked a question. Yes, do I know of any indie bookstores near Boca Raton, Florida? Not off the top of my head, but if you go to bookshop.org, that's the beauty of it. It'll tell you what the nearest one is. And also, many indie bookstores are happy to ship to customers whatever you want. So I want to thank everybody for being here and for asking questions and making comments. And I especially want to thank Jayne Anne for being here. I'm so thrilled to talk to you. And I love this book so much. I'm going to show the gorgeous cover again. It's a fabulous book and a fabulous cover. So I'll see all of you next time on LitFic. And Jayne, you just hang on for a minute so I can thank you again off screen. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Caroline.
You're welcome.